What up, everybody? Welcome to the Orange Blood Texas Football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson. As always, for the most part, so far in this channel's existence, it has been Anwar and I doing all of the shows. But, glad to be with you. Glad to be talking more Texas football. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, because we want to build this thing into the #1 Texas football YouTube channel on all of YouTube. And judging by the early success of the channel and the feedback we've been getting, I think we're on our way of doing that. Anwar, and oh, by the way, like the video, subscribe and like and subscribe. Either of those two things or both would be awesome, and we would and do appreciate it. Today, we're talking Jordan Whittington, Texas wide receiver Jordan Whittington, one of the most important players in the Texas program right now, one of the most important players in the program for the 2021 season. And yet, Anwar, when we talk and think about Jordan Whittington, the football player slash, I suppose, still prospect, he's still a guy that is kind of shrouded in mystery. We have not seen him at his best for extended moments of time. And so it makes, I think, having a conversation about him somewhat tricky, because you have to be careful to talk too much about how good a guy is when he hasn't been that player yet at the college level.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the tough part, because look, when he was at Cuervo, I mean, he was a stud. Catch, I don't know where you had him ranked on your LSR. And by the way, you can explain to everyone what that is, but it's Catch's own high school rankings. And I mean, this guy was a stud. How many times do you see a guy who's an offensive and defensive MVP in the state championship game? I mean, this was the guy that was able to do it all, whether it was on a defensive side as a linebacker, as a running back. I mean, he was electrifying, and you thought you would see that. You thought that's an easy translation as relates to getting to the University of Texas. And then he gets here, and it's just injuries. It's fighting injuries. It's having a surgery, because I think he had like the sports hernia to start off with. Then he got hurt when the season started. And I think he had another surgery afterwards. And it's kind of become like this man, myth, and the legend thing. So you know that there's a potential there, because the guy, we know what we saw in high school, and that was undeniable, bona fide stud. But what we just haven't seen is what he looks like when he's healthy. And maybe when he's healthy, it's totally different, but he hasn't been healthy enough for us to really be able to pinpoint it. And of course, we have this coaching staff. We'll get into that. The coaching staff obviously speaks highly of him, but he still is, to your point, a little bit of a wild card when we start talking about the Texas receivers, because we just don't know.
Well, and I don't know what the number of receptions the Texas coaches, you start talking about, what are we going to do in the passing game? What will our season numbers look like? And who fills the void of responsibility to make sure that occurs? It feels like Jordan Whittington is behind whoever emerges as a starting quarterback, and then Bijan Robinson. He is probably the most important player in the entire program on the offensive side of the ball. What's a fair set of expectations for him this season? There's a part of me that thinks, okay, well, he's due to have that Tom Herman year in the slot. Like, he's that guy now where, in theory, he should be a high volume target guy. If anybody's going to catch 100 passes on this roster, to me, it's definitely going to be him, or anybody even in that ballpark. But again, he hasn't had remotely close to that level of production. So what in the hell is fair to expect? Like, what at the end of this season? Let me throw it to you like this. If Jordan Whittington has 50 receptions for 735 yards and 7 touchdowns, is that a success? He's never had that kind of season before. But if that's as good as he does, I have some real concerns about where the productivity in this Texas offense is going to be, if it's going to be an offense that can win 10 games this season.
All right, so here's a question. Is he the team's leading receiver within that equation?
I mean, who the hell else would be?
I don't. I mean, you have. Joshua Moore potentially.
I don't even know that Joshua Moore is a starter right now.
Okay, fair enough. I'm trying to go through my head. You're right. I'm looking. This is one of the things we talk about. Look, we're looking for 1,000-yard receiver on this Texas roster. I don't know if it exists at this moment. Hey, one of them could prove us wrong, and one of them will do an edit and look at this video and play it back, or maybe someone plays this in the meeting room and says, "Look at these guys; they're doubting you." But I don't know, Ketch, if there's a 1,000-yard guy. I don't know if there's a guy who we're saying takes the top off. I don't know if there is a next big thing, that you would consider. Who was the last great Texas receiver who's the last great Texas receiver, Ketch?
Devin Duvernay.
Okay. So that would be so is someone the next Devin Duvernay? And we didn't know Devin Duvernay was Devin Duvernay up until that year, because there wasn't a body of work that showed that Devin Duvernay was going to be able to do what he did, and then he did it. If that ends up being his numbers and he stays healthy, then I think that's a good year for him. Right. I think overall that's a good year for him, because 1, he was able to stay healthy. 2, he was able to contribute. It's nothing that we looked at and said, oh my gosh. But then in that equation, there may have been 1 or 2, probably 2 100-yard receiving games, right? Easily. So it's going to be a low, but there's probably at least a 120 in there, a 130 in there. So that would definitely mean like he was a game changer, a difference maker, at least in a couple of games. But we know with receivers, there's going to be another couple of games where you have 30 yards or 40 yards. And but that would mean overall he was consistent. And so if he was healthy and consistent throughout the year in the new system, then I would say, okay, this is some building momentum. But I can't place an expectation right now that I think he's a 1,200-yard receiving guy, 1,300-yard receiving guy, that drops 15 touchdowns. I don't know if there's a Devontae Smith on this roster right now. Yes, Sarkisian coached one of those, but I think we have some time before we have that kind of guy that's on this roster. But I think Texas could have some really productive receivers. And if he is one of these productive receivers, then overall I'll say it's a good season.
Do you remember Jordan Whittington's touchdown receptions as a Texas player in any of the big games?
No.
Do you remember any Jordan Whittington touchdown receptions?
No.
He's never had one, Anwar.
Well, good. At least I answered correctly with the trick question here.
He scored on a rushing touchdown last year, but in his career as a receiver through 2 seasons is 23 receptions, 223 yards receiving. That's a less than 10 yards a reception, and he's never caught a touchdown.
In how many games, though? In how many games? Do you have that up there?
I think he played 6 last year. So he played 5 last year, and he's played 6 games in his career. So like I said, he's easily, I think, the most talented guy that Texas has in the receiving unit right now. They are talking about him as a guy that's going to be a key in this offense. It's just a level of performance and consistency and consistent productivity that going into his 3rd season, he hasn't remotely come close to achieving. And it feels like when people talk about, oh, well, Texas is going to win at least 9 games, and there's no way they can lose fewer than 9 because Steve Sarkisian's running the offense. It feels like they're saying that this guy's got to have even better, what did I say, 35 catches for like 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's triple his entire career in a lot of ways in terms of receptions and yardage, and he has no touchdown reception. So, and yet I feel like that would be a disappointment today. I feel like if you tried to offer that to the Texas coaches, they would say, no, we'll take our chances that we're going to get more out of him than that. Again, it puts Jordan Whittington in a really fascinating position. He's not unlike Bijan Robinson, who enters this season with Heisman odds on his name. He did not consistently go, 100 yards week in and week out. And look, there's a million reasons, injuries, and he was a true freshman, and he needed to learn how to block better, and
Lack of touches.
Yeah, all of these things, right? There's a lot of reasons why. It doesn't change the fact that asking a guy to not just take a big leap forward from one season to the next, that's a big ask. Hey, we need you to make a big jump. What I feel like they're asking Bijan Robinson and Jordan Whittington is to take monumental jumps. And it feels like with Bijan, we think, okay, it's asking a lot to make a monumental jump, but he's good enough to do it. I don't know. I think Jordan Whittington's really good. I think he's the best player in that program. I don't know that a guy that hasn't learned to run yet. He's been in the walking stage and not in the running stage of his career. I don't know that I can ask him to be like a marathon runner yet. Like it's a lot to ask of a guy who just hasn't remotely been close to being that type of performer yet. And I don't know what to think of this Texas offense if he doesn't have the monumental leap forward. This program needs its starting quarterback to have a wide receiver that can be his whoopee blanket. And, I'm not saying he's not capable of it. He's certainly capable of it. But if you told me, will Jordan Whittington start more than 8 games this year? If I say buy, I'll say I'm buying, but deep down, I don't know. Like what was the first question you asked me a second ago? How many games did he play a year ago? He played 5, and he started twice.
So let me ask you this. And this will be the last thing I'll say on it. I'll let you kind of start to wrap it up with this one. He was praised a lot during the spring ball. Whether people we talked to said positive things about him, Sarkisian said positive things about him. So they believe that he's bona fide. They believe that he's good enough. Do you think, one thing we didn't see in the spring game is that you didn't see scheming, right? The spring game was almost, to a certain degree, it was almost like a pickup game, right? There was no scheming as well. They were just running plays, okay? When Sarkisian goes and starts to scheme, and when he's scheming offense versus defense, trying to attack other people's weaknesses, looking for holes that are within someone's defense, when it's time to scheme, do you think and believe that Sarkisian is good enough where he can make a Jordan Whittington look good because he's finding the holes as a play caller, as opposed to someone just telling him, hey, just do it naturally? So this is a faith in Sarkisian question more than it is a faith in Jordan kind of question.
Yeah, but the answer is yes. But I don't worry about Sarkisian. I worry about a guy that I don't know if he can be on the field for 12 straight games. And here's the thing. If you told me, catch 50 receptions, 750 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns, would you take it, or would you gamble on whatever, roll the dice? I would roll the dice. In my head, Jordan Whittington is a 75 catch guy this year for exactly the reason that you just kind of said. Like, Steve Sarkisian needs a guy that he can be creative with to flow the passing game and the offense through. I think Jordan Whittington, when he's healthy, is going to be that guy. If Jordan Whittington starts 12 games, I think he catches more than 75 passes. I think he is a 1,000-yard receiver. I think even though he has 0 touchdowns in his entire college career in the receiving game, I think he can catch between 7 and 10 touchdowns this season. That's how, for me, Texas gets to 9-3. The question for me really starts to become, I don't think Texas can be a 9-3 team, really, if he's not that kind of a guy. Unless someone else, whether it's Joshua Moore, who I don't think is that guy, although I think he has a chance to have a really good year, but I don't think he's going to be a volume dominant, statistical, like wildfire guy. I think he's a hot and cold guy, and he'll have his moments, and I think he needs to be on the field. But I can't trust him either. I don't know who the guys are in the passing game suddenly when we start talking about Texas needs to throw for 3,500 to 4,000 yards on the offensive side of the ball, or at least 3,000. I don't know who's, the running backs can catch a hell of a lot of passes, and I still don't completely know who is filling in the gaps for all of the catches and productivity that the passing game is going to need. So he has to be that guy. If you tell me that I gamble and he doesn't remotely come close to the numbers that I just said, I think Texas has some problems on the offensive side of the ball. I think they become way too reliant on Bijan Robinson at that point. I think you've got a passing game with the quarterbacks that lacks a go-to receiver. And if I've got inexperienced quarterbacks who are making their first starts, making their first road starts, making their first games against Oklahoma, they're doing all these, whoever starts will be doing a lot of firsts this season. I want them to be doing their firsts with somebody who can be little Jordan Humphrey this year, someone who can be Devin Duvernay this year, somebody who on 3rd and 6, they know that's their guy. Jordan Whittington, for me, has to be that guy because I don't know that Texas has anybody else on the roster. We're talking about whether or not he is remotely close to being able to do the things that's going to be asked of him. I don't know that Texas has anybody remotely close that's ready to do the things that are going to be tasked of him. So if he's not able to do it, I think you could be talking about a very pedestrian Texas passing game. And that's not, I think, what Steve Sarkisian has up his sleeves. It's not the type of offense that he wants to have. But we know receiver is a big question mark on this team. If the best of the receivers on this team are pretty good, then this Texas offense won't be any better than pretty good. And, they were pretty good a year ago. This whole Steve Sarkisian thing is about going from pretty good to that next step. And the only way Texas can even start to think about, I think, doing that this year is with an offense that's ready to compete for a championship. And it will take, they don't need Devontae Smith, but they need at least little Jordan Humphrey. And little Jordan didn't even get drafted, but he was there every week. He produced numbers. You could lean on him. Jordan Whittington right now on paper is the only guy that any of these quarterbacks have to lean on. And let's hope that he can stay healthy because that's as big of a thing as anything else right now with Jordan Whittington. Anwar, you got anything else you want to add?
No, I will buy some Jordan Whittington stock. I won't buy a ton of it, but I'll definitely buy some Jordan Whittington stock, though. I'll definitely put a conservative buy-in on it.
I'd feel a hell of a lot better about my Hudson Card stock or any Casey Thompson stock that I own if I knew that Jordan Whittington stock was going to be very valuable come November. My fear is that it will be very valuable in September, and then in October and November, people will forgot that they bought Jordan Whittington stock because that's what's happened so far in each of the first 2 seasons. Look, for Anwar Richardson and myself, thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button and like the video if we did a decent enough job for you. Until next, I guess we'll see you on Monday. Thanks for watching the Orange Bloods YouTube channel. We'll try to have a good weekend. You do the same. Take care. Later.